Story 1. The roommate who never slept. I was in my second year of college when I had to move out of my whole dorm because my roommate dropped out mid-semester. The housing office reassigned me to a different building, older, quieter, the kind of place that always smelled like dust and old wood. My new roommate's name was Ryan. When I first met him, he seemed completely normal. Medium height, messy brown hair, pale skin, and always wearing the same gray hoodie, no matter the weather. He didn't talk much, just nodded when I said hello and helped me move my things in. The first few days were fine. We had small talk about classes and cafeteria food, and he seemed polite, a little awkward, maybe, but harmless. I noticed he didn't really leave the room much. He didn't have friends over, didn't talk on the phone. He mostly sat at his desk, typing on his laptop or staring at the wall. Then I started realizing something weird. I never saw him sleep. Our dorm was tiny, so it was impossible not to notice. I'd go to bed around midnight, and he'd still be at his desk, tapping away on the keyboard. I'd wake up at random hours, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, and he'd still be there. Same position, same hoodie, same blank face lit by the laptop screen. At first, I figured he just had insomnia, or maybe worked late on assignments. But even on weekends, when I'd sleep in till 10 or 11, he'd still be up, staring at the screen or looking out the window. One night, I joked, "Dude, do you ever sleep?" He turned his head slowly and gave me this half smile. "I'm not supposed to," he said quietly. I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was kidding. "What do you mean, not supposed to?" He just shrugged and turned back to his laptop. After that, I started feeling uneasy. There was something off about his routine. Too consistent, too mechanical. He'd sit completely still for hours. I never saw him blink much, and he barely ate. Sometimes I'd come back from class and find him standing in the dark, just facing the wall like he forgot where he was. Week later, things got worse. I woke up around 3:25 a.m. to the faint sound of whispering. My heart started pounding. I thought maybe Ryan was on the phone, but when I opened my eyes, I saw him sitting cross-legged on his bed, staring directly at me. He wasn't whispering into a phone. He was whispering to himself. Low, broken murmurs I couldn't make out. I said his name, and he stopped instantly. The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the laptop fan. He didn't answer, just stared at me, completely expressionless. That night, I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I asked him about it. He blinked a few times, looking confused, then said, "You must have been dreaming. I don't talk in my sleep." But I knew what I saw. A few nights later, it happened again, only worse. I woke up at the same time, 3:27 a.m. Something about that exact time kept repeating. I stayed still and pretended to sleep. Through my barely open eyelids, I could see Ryan get up slowly. His movements were stiff, unnatural. He walked across the room and stopped beside my bed. He just stood there, breathing softly. I could smell his hoodie, old fabric, and something faintly metallic. Then, in the quietest whisper, he said, "You can't move either, right?" My entire body froze. He leaned a little closer, like he was trying to listen for something inside me. I wanted to scream, but it felt like my throat locked up. After maybe a minute, he stepped back, turned toward his bed, and sat down again, perfectly still. I stayed awake until morning, pretending to be asleep. By the next day, I'd had enough. I went to the housing office and told them something was wrong with my roommate, that he was acting strange, creeping me out. The lady behind the desk looked confused and asked me for his name. When I told her, she frowned and typed something into her computer. Then she said, "There's no student named Ryan assigned to your room." I laughed nervously and told her that wasn't possible. I had been living with him for 2 weeks. She double-checked the records. The room was listed as mine only. That night, I went back to pack my things. My plan was to sleep in a friend's dorm and figure it out the next day. When I opened the door, the room was dark, but Ryan's side was completely empty. His bed was made. No laptop, no clothes, nothing. Kata, even his sheets were gone. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen. Then I noticed something carved into the wooden desk. Faint, jagged letters scratched into the surface. 327. Don't wake up. That's when I realized. Every night I'd woken up, it had been exactly that time. I moved out the next morning and never got an explanation. The school said maybe there had been a mix-up, or maybe I'd misunderstood. But the cleaning staff told me quietly that no one had been in that room for the last semester. It had been locked for maintenance because the last student who lived there had died around 3:30 in the morning. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I still see that number on my clock to 3:27 a.m. And I swear, for just a moment, I can feel someone standing next to my bed, whispering, "You can't move either, right?" Story 2. The Craigslist roommate. After college, I moved to a small city for my first full-time job. Rent was high, so I decided to find a roommate online. I made a post on Craigslist, and within a day, a guy named Evan replied. Seemed normal enough. Early 30s, clean background check. Said he worked remotely in IT. We met once at a cafe before I agreed to let him move in. He was quiet, polite, maybe a little too calm, but he paid the deposit on the spot. At first, everything was fine. We split chores, cooked our own meals, and mostly stayed out of each other's way. I liked that. After the chaos of college housing, the peace and quiet felt great. But about 2 weeks in, I started noticing strange things. Little things, at first. The bathroom mirror fogged up when I came home from work, even though no one should have showered that day. My bedroom door would be slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. Food from the fridge went missing. Not whole meals, just small amounts, like half a sandwich or a few bites from leftovers. When I asked Evan, he just smiled and said, "Maybe you're forgetting, man. Long hours at work mess with your head." I brushed it off. He was probably right. But the feeling of being watched crept up on me more and more. One night, I woke up around 1 a.m. to the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. My bedroom door creaked slightly. I sat up and held my breath. The footsteps stopped. I grabbed my phone and shined the flashlight toward the door. It was closed. The next morning, I asked Evan if he'd been up. He said no, claimed he'd been sleeping since 10. That weekend, I decided to test something. Before leaving for groceries, I set a tiny piece of paper at the top edge of my door, a little trap that would fall if anyone opened it. When I came back, the paper was on the floor. Evan was in the living room watching TV, acting casual. I didn't mention it. I just went to my room and checked my things. Nothing looked missing, but I had that gut-deep feeling that someone had been in there. A few days later, I found something that made my skin crawl. I was cleaning the shared closet when I saw a loose panel behind the coats. It looked like part of the drywall had been replaced badly. Out of curiosity, I pried it open, and behind it was a small hole leading into a crawl space. Inside were three objects: an empty instant ramen cup, a phone charger, and a small handheld camera. When I turned it over, I saw my name written on a piece of tape stuck to the back. I froze. My stomach turned cold. I put it back exactly as I found it and closed the panel. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in bed, pretending to, waiting. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard the faintest shuffle from the hallway. Then a soft click, the sound of my door opening. Through the crack, I saw Evan's silhouette. He stood there for a full minute, not moving, just listening. Then he stepped inside. He walked right up to my bed and whispered, "You breathe heavy when you're asleep." I didn't move. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I had a baseball bat under the bed, but I was terrified to reach for it. He leaned closer. I could smell his breath, and then quietly said, "You shouldn't lock your door." Then he left, closing it gently behind him. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened, smiling, drinking coffee, scrolling on his phone. That day, I packed a bag and went straight to a friend's place. I told Evan my boss needed me out of town for work, and I'd be gone for a few days. He nodded without looking up. When I came back with a couple of friends to grab the rest of my stuff, the apartment was empty. His room was stripped bare. No clothes, no furniture, not even dust on the floor. He'd vanished completely. Reported it to the landlord, who said the lease info for him didn't exist. The name Evan wasn't on any rental record. He wasn't even in the building's system. The last thing I found was on the inside of my bedroom door. Something I swear wasn't there before, scratched into the paint, barely visible unless the light hit it right. Were the words, "I still breathe quiet when you sleep." Story 3. The sublet. I moved to the city last spring for a short-term contract job. The position was only 8 weeks, so I didn't want a full lease to something temporary, okay? After scrolling through listings, I found a sublet that looked almost too good. Fully furnished, good neighborhood, 2-month stay, utilities included. The ad said I'd be sharing with a woman named Leah, whose cousin Mara technically owned the place. When I arrived, Mara met me in person. She was friendly, maybe a little distant, and handed me a single key. "Leah mostly keeps to herself," she said. "She works nights. You'll barely know she's here." Then she smiled at practice dad, left that same evening. The apartment itself was perfect. Lots of plants on the windowsill, a faint smell of lavender, sunlight spilling over clean hardwood floors. For the first week, everything was peaceful. Leah and I rarely crossed paths. She'd appear around dusk, dressed for work in dark clothes, and disappear before I woke up. I appreciated the quiet, but small things began to bother me. My bedroom door, which I always shut, would be open in the morning. Items on my dresser shifted a few inches. One evening, my toothbrush was damp before I'd used it. When I asked Leah if she'd been cleaning the bathroom, she said, "I don't touch other people's things," and smiled without blinking. A few nights later, the apartment started smelling faintly metallic like old blood or pennies soaked in hot water. Kai checked the pipes, even took out the trash, but the smell kept returning, strongest near the hallway closet that Leah never opened. Kai. Then came the noises. Around 2 a.m., when I knew Leah was supposed to be at work, I'd hear the floor creak as if someone was walking barefoot down the hall. The bathroom door would click. Water would run for a minute, then stop. I told myself the plumbing was old, but the sounds were too deliberate to human. One night, I decided to look. I crept out of bed and cracked my door open. The bathroom light was on, steam rolling under the door. I pushed it open slowly. The mirror was fogged solid, but through the condensation, 3 words stood out. Written by a fingertip. Don't trust her. The letters dripped as if they'd just been drawn. The water still ran. The room was empty. I turned off the faucet, wiped the mirror clean, and locked myself in my room until sunrise. The next morning, Leah was at the table, sipping coffee, humming softly. I asked if she'd used the bathroom overnight. She looked up, tilting her head slightly. "AP Mara stopped by," she said. I reminded her Mara was traveling. Leah's smile widened. "She never travels far." That sentence stuck in my head all day. By week 3, I had made up my mind to move out early. I started packing after work. While folding clothes, I noticed the air vent grill above my bed was crooked. Standing on a chair, I removed it and froze. Behind the slats was a phone taped to a small battery pack, its camera pointed directly at my bed. My hands shook as I powered it on. There were dozens of short clips, each labeled with the date and time between midnight and 3 a.m. The videos were grainy, shot through the vent. I watched the first one, me asleep. At the 2-minute mark, a shape entered to frame a human figure leaning over me, long hair. The camera shook slightly, as if whoever filmed was breathing hard. I dropped the phone and grabbed my keys. When I reached the front door, the chain wouldn't budge. Someone had installed it backward. Key could only be opened from the outside. Then Leah's bedroom door opened. The key, she stepped out, wearing Mara's long gray coat. Her face looked different in the dim hallway light, paler, heavier around the eyes. "You found it?" she said quietly. "Where's Mara?" I asked. My voice cracked. "She's still here," Leah whispered. "She just doesn't like being alone." She pointed toward the living room window. The row of plants trembled even though no draft blew. Behind them, the curtain moved slow, deliberate, like someone breathing behind the fabric. I didn't wait to see. I kicked the door until the chain ripped free and ran down the stairwell barefoot, my heartbeat echoing off the walls. I didn't stop until I reached my car. The next morning, I called the property manager. He sounded puzzled. He said the unit wasn't a sublet. It had been sealed for months because the original tenant, Mara Gibson, had been reported missing nearly a year earlier. There was no record of anyone named Leah ever living there. When the police searched the apartment, they found most of Mara's belongings still inside. But the bedroom Leah used was empty except for the vent camera and a coat folded neatly on the bed. No fingerprints, no trace of her. That was 8 months ago. Sometimes, just before falling asleep, I catch that same metallic smell in my room, like wet copper. And every so often, when the mirror fogs after a shower, 3 faint words reappear, as if written from the other side of the glass. Don't trust her. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.